So let me go ahead into the problem solving portion of this. I'm going to take you through a huge amount of stuff in a very, very short time. I'll put the video up so you can take a look at that as well. But just to let you know before we start in, the idea of this discussion is not to go into any kind of depth on any of the stuff that I'm going to be showing you. Because if you want to, you can peek right here. You look at the number here. There's 94 slides in here, right? And we're going to go through this in like 20 minutes, right? So we're definitely not going to spend a whole lot of time on any particular slides. The reason why a lot of these things are here is to let you know that they exist, right? And if once you know that they exist, you can always go and look them up later and go figure things out, right? So, you know, with pretty much all the information of the world at our fingertips, it's really less critical that you have a huge amount of stuff stored in your brain. What you do need to have stored in your brain is how to go through all that information and figure out what's important and what's not, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about as we go through here, not the specifics of any individual thing that I'm going to show you here, right? So you may have seen this structure, this sort of problem-solving structure. This is a McKinsey structure. They call it, I think, the 7 steps of problem-solving. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 steps to problem-solving. Right? We've been doing this and you can see it's sort of an iterative thing, right? So at the end, it kind of comes back to new problems all the time. So we've been doing this in your projects this entire time. So kind of step back from it a little bit and recognize what it is that you've been doing. We started off with a client problem, we defined it, right? And this is a continuous thing. That's the iterative part of it, right? As we go, the problem becomes clearer, in more details, more specific, right? And then whatever it is, and we structure the problem, figuring out what are the different issues there, what do we need to work on first, and then there's the work plan. This is what you guys are doing. Go out and get data, right? There's analytics, and putting them all together, develop a recommendation, right? And this is kind of happening on an iterative basis, even on a daily basis. Should have some idea of right now. If you were to ask me, what's my recommendation, what's my answer to the problem that I'm working on, right? You should have something to say, right? Concisely. This is exactly what we've been going through right now. So this is what I think. This is what I know right now. This is what I think the answer is. Here are the pieces that are missing, and this is what I'm going to be doing next. Okay. Now I try to simplify this a little bit because, you know, as I talked to you before. This is the sequence of actually doing the work of how this is from the problem's eye perspective, let's say from the project perspective. This is how the project runs, but this is not how you actually learn any of this stuff or how you do it, which is a little bit different. And I kind of put it this way. I've reduced the 7 to 5. Started off with the problem definition again as the same and the problem structure. But then what I've done is I've taken some of this stuff, the work planning, and just put it into the problem structure. And then I've isolated this area what I call data gathering, right? Which is mostly what you're going to be doing right now. And this is a lot of what you have been doing actually, and putting all this data together. And then going back to the analysis, essentially putting all that data together to see what it means. And there's a lot of, you'll see a lot of stuff about what's the difference between data and analysis and information and knowledge and wisdom and whatever, right? So, but the idea is that you have the raw data. This is the information that you're pulling right now. The analysis is where we're putting back together, where we're, in some cases disaggregating it, and then also putting it back together to meet the needs of the problem structure that we've been put together before, right? And then once we have all of those outcomes, those so what's, the findings from the data, right? Once we have those, we want to put those together to figure out what our solution is, what the end product is. That, of course, needs to be related to what our problem was or what our problem definition was. So you see, the reason I put it this way is to show the linkages between these pieces, right? That's one part of it, right? So when you're thinking about a problem, right, you should think about what the solution to that problem is at the same time as you're thinking about it. This is your hypothesis that you're going to be thinking about, right? So if you do that, this is when when we talk about defining your end deliverable, getting specific about it. what exactly it needs to be, right? The more you do that, the more you understand what your problem is, the more, because you see what you're missing, the more you think about what your problem is, the more you get an understanding of what your solution needs to be, right? The test is, okay, if I had this, would my problem be solved, right? And if the answer is yes, okay, then that's it. That's the solution you need. If not, then you still got something else to do, right? So there's a very direct relationship between what you're creating and what you're trying to solve, or at least there should be, because the solution is supposed to solve the problem. Okay. Now, the second level, once you have what the overall issue is, you want to break it down into constituent pieces. Right. We'll talk about how to do that. That's the structuring piece of it. We've been doing that within the teams, as you know. So you've been handing out different pieces of work to different people. We've been thinking about the components of the problem in certain different ways. Like, for example, in the social media group, there's content, there's ads, and there's analytics. There's a lot of different ways to structure. We're going to be flying through a lot of different structures in this discussion right here, and we'll kind of come back to them as we need it. But when you put those structures together, that is essentially, you're defining the analyses that you want to do. Okay, because we want to look at ABC, and so therefore we're going to be doing analyses ABC, right? So those things also go together. The problem structure is essentially telling you what the analytics are. And as you do your analysis, you may find additional analysis that's interesting that you hadn't considered in your problem structure before. And so you move backwards as well. You modify your problem structure. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I should be thinking about that too. And here's a piece of information that addresses that directly, right? And so once you've got your structure, you know what analyses you need to do, then the question is plugging in the data, putting in the numbers or the information that you need to put in there to make sure that what your hypothesis is, what you think is the situation, is actually valid. Or if not, if you're finding data that goes the other way, then you alter what you think the solution needs to be. So once you've got this, the next level is, all right, let's go get the data to see what it actually says and start putting this all together, right? So you see these you see these relationships, right? Whereas the work is going this way, the thought is actually going these two, and then these two, and then this going, and the data gathering happening kind of at the end there, and then going backwards. And there's also a relationship here. You see the hierarchy here. There's also a relationship here with your career progression, right? Because what happens when you start coming into a situation is you're basically down here. You're at the data gathering area, right? This is the sort of entry level work that we do. It's pretty much about technical skills, right? You're figuring out how to cleanse data, how to build a model, how to use analytic platforms, all these things that you guys are doing, right? This is pretty technical work. You just got to get in and learn how to do this, right? This is the front lines of the war, the coal face of the mine. This is where the grassroots activity is happening. That's where you start. The key issue here is reliability, right? We just need to make sure that you guys are doing the things that you agreed to do, and that's been great so far. But from an entry-level employee, at least from my perspective, that's all I'm looking for. It's not anything particularly mind-bending or rocket science or anything like that. The data gathering, as you probably seen, yeah, there's some creativity involved and there's some thought involved in all of that. That's true, but a lot of it is just a little bit of a slog, copying and pasting from here and there, and changing around items and cleansing and so on. And you'll find that actually with any data scientist that you talk to, that the vast majority of their time is taken up just doing that, making sure the data is right. Because if the data is not right, the rest of it doesn't really matter, right? So this is absolutely critical. This is the garbage in, garbage out situation, right? So if the data isn't good going in, none of the rest of it's going to work. Very, very important. It's the first thing that you're going to be doing. Now, once you know how all this works, where to get data, how to put it together, and so on, the next thing you want to think about is, well, what data do you need, right? And that's where the problem structure issue comes in. This is a manager level type of work. This is usually in your third year, right? Maybe if you're doing really well in your second year, and if you're a little bit behind, maybe in your fourth year, but roughly around the third year, right, you should be performing at this level. So you should be moving up. It's just one thing, again, I can't tell you how a lot of other companies work, but where I was, the sort of dictum was you get promoted to a level once you show that you can do it, right? It's not the other way around. You don't get promoted and then try to figure out how to do this, right? You get promoted when you've already figured out how to do this. So that means that at any level, you're essentially practicing for the next level up, demonstrating what you can do, right? Auditioning for that, right? And as soon as everybody says, hey, this person's ready to be a manager, then you'll be a manager, right? And so at that level, your primary job is problem structuring, telling people what data to get. If you're down here, somebody's already telling you what data to get, right? So Dobby is, told us, hey, listen, this is my data wish list. I'm telling you guys, go look at this. Let's go look at that, right? So I'm playing the manager level here, but I'm asking you to think about this as well, right? So because you're kind of, you want to think about what your next level is going to be, right? And so here you're thinking about what data it is that you need, and then you're going to have to give instruction to the team that's working under you, right? And on what they need to do, as well as obviously listening to them, because they're the ones at the front end here, right? So here it's a lot of interpersonal skills that we're talking about, and we're moving from more technical skills to more interpersonal skills. There's sort of managerial skills, making sure people are doing what they're doing, they know what they need to do, that they're that they're happy and having an okay time, and not at least not about to revolt, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of interpersonal actions going on here, but you've already been through the technical part. So at this stage, you should have a reasonable idea of what it is that these people are doing down here, so you can give them a hand if they're having trouble as well. And then the next level up, at this point, I'm being told what the issue is, what the problem is, right? So here at the leadership level is where you're thinking about, okay, what is the problem? Why are we doing these things? So we've got 4 projects now over 2 clients, right? Where did those projects come from? Who came up with them, right? Why are we doing those projects and not something else, right? That's where the issue identification and problem definition came to. It wasn't like these clients came to us and said, hey, we need a resource database, and we need we need to figure out social media, right? Sometimes that happens. Clients could come to you, but if a client is going out and looking for that stuff, it's probably a bidding situation. They're going to ask like a bunch of different people, and you're all going to bid. Whereas the stuff that we're doing here, if you're kind of coming up with this on your own, then there's nobody else to bid on. You're kind of going and presenting, look, this is what I think you guys should be working on, and so that tends to be a lot more conceptual, right? So you're looking at a situation, you don't really have any guidance at all, and then you're trying to piece everything together to figure out what you might do about the situation. So this is a leadership level. This is at the partner level. Usually from the data gathering to this level is around a 6-year time frame that we're talking about. And that's when you're dealing directly with partners and doing sales and putting projects together. And all that kind of stuff. The other thing to realize is from this level to this level, the drop off is about 1 in 36, right? So from this level to this level is about 1 in 6, right? So 5 out of 6 folks who come into, again, this is the company I worked at. I can't speak for others, but for us, 5 out of 6 people would not make it to manager. Most of those people would leave on their own to find other things that they wanted to do. More specific industries or functions that they really enjoy, that they want to go work with. A lot of times it's kind of family related, because down here you're traveling a lot, you're going to different client sites, right? Maybe you don't want to do that, and actually you're traveling everywhere. This is a travel intensive industry and career. Can you guys still hear me? I'm getting a little sign here that says my internet connection is unstable.
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, excellent. What was I saying here? So yeah, there's a lot of travel involved. People decide, hey, I want to have a family, I want to settle down, I want to be in one place, I don't want to do this anymore. And so a lot of people wind up leaving. Okay, so going from here, so this is about a 1 in 6, and the same thing here, from problem structuring to doing this to getting to the partner level, right? This is another 1 in 6 drop off, because the job is very, very different, right? Over here, you're working on problems, you're getting stuff done, you're doing the stuff that we are doing right now. Whereas over here, this is more of a sales job, right? So here you're going out and talking to new clients, hitting people up, doing your networking, trying to land the next job. It's a very much sales oriented thing, very externally focused kind of thing. It's not for everybody. For example, this really wasn't for me. I hate doing this, right? I like doing this, what you guys are doing right now. And so, I mean, some of this you have to do, otherwise you don't get clients. But this is one of the reasons that I left, is because I didn't really want to be a sales guy. I don't like that, right? I like doing the work down here. So, one way we think about this is over the course of a career, right? You'll start off, you're going to be needing the technical skills, right? As we're talking about, then eventually going into the interpersonal skills when you become the management, then ultimately the conceptual skills when you're getting into a leadership position. The thing is, what you guys are taught right now is almost exactly the reverse of this, right? It's heavy on conceptual skills, right? And then, quite a bit on interpersonal skills, not really a whole lot on technical skills. So, they say we're training you to be leaders, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're giving you all the tools you need to be leaders, except there's a couple of hoops to jump through first to get to. So, hopefully we're going to get some of those things in as well. Some places where you see that they kind of focus on more on technical skills, right? Then folks have a tendency to get stuck somewhere, right? And then they need to pick up the conceptual skills. Frankly, I mean, I think picking up the technical skills is easier than the conceptual skills. So it's really good that you guys are doing this early. I think it's going to put you in a better situation in the long run. But in the short run, there are some things you're going to need to bone up on. Those are the things that we're doing right now. So that's fine. Two more things I just wanted to lay out there to think about in terms of managing yourself is what's called upward management, and then time management, of course. What upward management means is how effectively are you using the folks on top of you, on higher up than you, right? So in this situation, how effectively are you using me, right? So are you getting everything that you want out of me, and are you doing everything that you can to make sure that you're getting what you need out of me? So I've been pretty happy. Most of you guys have been reaching out and asking questions, and we've been having good discussions and telling me where you need to go and so on. So that's been great so far. So think about what else I can do for you, right? As I said, I think I generally respond to requests and questions, right? And this is the same way you want to think about, okay, how can you get the most out of your professors or your bosses or your clients or anybody else? How am I managing those guys, right? What am I getting out of that? And then, of course, the time management. I don't think I'm hoping you guys, on the one hand, have enough to do and aren't getting bored, and on the other hand, aren't so swamped that you're feeling overwhelmed. But if you find either of those things is happening, again, back to the upper management, let me know. Or if you're having trouble organizing your time and you'd like to have some tips on how to do that, we can have that discussion as well. So let me know, and we can, if there's enough people, we can have an open session. Otherwise, we can talk about it individually. All right. All that being said, kind of a long-winded thing. We're just going to go through this piece by piece, right? What the different areas are. We're going to start off at the issue identification level, right? A lot of this stuff we talked about. Now, these are the things that we talked about. We're not going to be going into depth, right? This is just to let you know that there is such a thing out there called a problem definition worksheet, which is a tool that consultants use during the problem definition stage, right? So here's essentially breaking down the problem into all these different things. There's a smart thing going on here. All you have to do, and this is exactly how I got this, is Google problem definition worksheet, right? Go to images and you'll find all of this stuff. I just got to pick that off of there, right? Here's another version of it. So here's my guys again, right? So here's another version of it, very, very similar to what you see here, maybe with a couple of differences, right? Here's an example that we put together for one of the problems that I handed out to my intro class one year, right? So all these things are there as an example. Now, for our projects, what we're doing, right, is this is how I'd put it in, and we're talking about, kind of matching the problem with the solution. For the F&B group, we're thinking about how the F&B businesses can succeed post-COVID, right? And so what we're trying to put together is a set of sustainable post-COVID F&B business models, okay? For the recovery team, we're thinking about how can the AC business Addison County businesses find and make use of recovery resources that are out there for COVID-19. So what we want to put together is an easy to use recovery database with or without maybe application assistance, meaning is it enough to just have a database and see that certain things are available, right? Or do they need some help in actually applying, and where we probably need to think about that at some point. Right? For the digital outreach group, how can we best use social media to attract donors? Then we're going to be putting together a social media management system, which what the system does is use social media to attract donors, right? So that's what we need to design. And for the investor pitch, we need to think about how we approach institutional investors. Well, the way we're going to be doing that is by actually approaching institutional investors, complete investments, do the grant pitches, put the applications in, and through that, get the answer to this question, how does this work? So that's what we're working on here. And within this, you can already see that the structure presents itself, right? So if we're going to have a sustainable post-COVID F&B business model, well, what do we need? We know what a business model is. It's a value proposition and customers and activities and financials and so on. So that's exactly what we need. We need a bunch of value propositions and financials and activities, right? Which are sustainable, right, in the post-COVID environment. So we need to think about what the post-COVID environment means. What's that going to be doing for demand? What's it going to be doing for consumer behavior, right? Sustainability is essentially, it's an economic thing. We need to make sure that it's going to be covering its costs. We're not losing money, right? So what is sustainable? What is post-COVID? And what's an F&B business model? The structure is right there in the question, right? In the solution. Same here, right? We're talking about recovery database. What needs to be in there? What does it mean to be easy to use, right? What might application assistance be looking like, right? So we got 3 things right in there, right? Social media management system. We can break that down. We had 2 dimensions of this. One was the platform, LinkedIn, website, Google, and Facebook, right? On the other hand, on the other dimension, we had activities in social media management, which was content production and publication, and then traffic generation, which is taking out ads, right? And then analytics to see how any of that stuff is working. Okay, so those things are right there, right? And for the investor pitch, again, and right there, right? So we're going to complete either the investment or grant pitches or applications, right? And we're going to need to find out what they are, right? Figure out what pitch we need to make and put in the applications, right? So the structure is suggested right there. And if it's not, then you kind of redo it until it is. You keep thinking about it, right? And that's the next level we go through, right? And when you're thinking about structure, when we talked about business model canvas, right? That is what we call, framework, right? Framework is just a way of breaking a larger problem down into smaller problems. Essentially, it's a structure. A framework is a structure of some kind of problems. So as you go through this, you realize that there's lots of different frameworks that are already out there. And if one of those fits what you're looking for, then boom, you can just plug and play, right? And there you are, and your structure is done. And you know exactly what analysis that you need to do because the analysis is part of the framework. If not, then you may need to structure yourself. You may need to build your own framework. And in fact, that's what's going to happen. A lot of times what happens is the problem definition forces you, because it's a unique problem, that somebody's dealing with, forces you to create your own problem structure. But then within your problem structure, there are frameworks that build into it, that build up, that all come together to create your solution. Okay, and so what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to be taking you through a whole pile of frameworks, right? And again, we're not going depth into anything. You don't need to know these right now. All I'm saying is recognize that they exist. So when it comes time that you need one of these things, oh, that's what I need, right? And you can go looking for it and learn all about it as you go, right? So some of these things we've used already, right? We've used business model canvas. That's one framework, okay? I'm gonna break this down. This is in fact another framework, right? This is a framework for understanding the different components of a business, of a company, right? You can talk about the strategy, you can talk about its marketing, you can talk about its operations organization, you talk about the finance and the accounting. This is exactly how I break up my intro to business class. We talk about each one of these things over the course of the semester, right? So, and in my management class, we talk about the same thing. This is actually a slide from my management class where we're going through this little refresher of all the different, not all of them, but a bunch of different business frameworks that are out there, right? So here's a bunch of strategy frameworks, a bunch of marketing frameworks, a bunch of operations organization frameworks, a bunch of finance and accounting frameworks. And we're going to go through each area of this and just show you an example of these things. And then if you want to, when you need something about marketing, you can see, okay, can I use one of these things? If I need something about finance and accounting, which ones of these are we working on here, right? So it's a little bit of a menu here that you can choose from, right? So starting off with the strategy, we already talked about the business model canvas, right? There's the Porter's 5 forces that you guys have used already, right, to understand how attractive this industry is, how participants participate. There's a lot of other industry analysis frameworks out there. Porter is just very famous. It was one of the first ones to start this whole idea of analyzing industries, but there's been tons of stuff done since then, getting more complicated. This is one called the structured conduct performance model that's got different elements to it that you can take a look at. This is another strategy thing. This is called the BCG matrix. It was created by the Boston Consulting Group, another consulting company that's out there. This is a way of thinking about a portfolio of businesses in your company, because a lot of companies have different businesses in that company, to kind of think about which businesses are doing well, which ones aren't, what should I do with them, which ones should I get rid of, right, and so on. So this is called the BCG matrix. Here's a SWOT analysis for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You'll probably hear this a lot. You may have already, right? Putting some thought into this gives you some idea of different types of strategies that you can do. Okay. Here is a framework talking about the relationship between values and actions, right? From the more conceptual to the things that you're doing right, day to day in your business, with a bunch of items in between. So your values are giving rise to your vision, or the other way around. Your vision is telling you what your values are. Right? You have a mission, is the vision is, what do you want to be at some point. The mission is how you're going to get there, what are you going to do, right? What are the strategies you're going to follow to do that? What actions are you going to be doing? KPIs is key performance indicators. This is the analytics part of it, right? What are the metrics that tell you whether your actions are actually meeting your strategic objectives and so on, right? There's a lot of different ways that these pyramids are put together. This is an S curve, right? This talks about different phases in the maturity of a product, right? From the R&D phase to the when it gets introduced, and ideally you get growth instead of fizzling out, right? And then a maturity phase, and then decline, right? The axis over here could be a lot of things. Here it says sales, right? It could be users, it could be sophistication. There's all sorts of stuff, right? So thinking about where you are in a product life cycle can help you think about, there's different strategies in each parts of this, right? So at the R&D stage, the strategy and the actions that you do is very, very different than what you do at the maturity stage, right? So that's one way you can think about where you are and what you need to be, right? You can see different S curves build on each other, right? You can put those together into a growth framework where you think about different businesses in your company, right, in terms of where they are on their curves. Because again, as we said, there's different things you do in different areas. So this is a growth strategy. And again, this is not the only one. There's lots of stuff out there. This is one of the ones that I use. It's just to give you an overview of what some of the strategic frameworks are. And so when you're thinking about strategy, you're thinking about big picture, where am I going with all this? Here's some of the tools that you can use, or you can just go back to Google and look for strategy frameworks for whatever you're looking at, and you'll see a bunch more that are out there. Finance and accounting, right, is another big area of work that we do. Basically, it goes through everything, right? Because whatever else we do, there's always an economic component to it. That's a sustainability component to it if you're just trying to make it run, or the return calculation if you're going out and looking for money that's going to be looking for a return, right? Those are always something to think about. In the business model canvas, right, you see this down here, right? So the strategy that we're talking about was the middle here. This is where you want to start, right? The next place we go to is, all right, what's this going to cost? How much are you going to be making? That's the bottom part of the business model canvas. Okay, and then we go into the financial statements, right? Again, we'll go into depth on this at some point because people want to talk about this. The three financial statements: the income statement, balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. This is the income statement. Each one of those things is basically a framework, right? It's taking some idea and breaking it down into its constituent pieces, right? So in different ways, right? This is the second one, the balance sheet. The whole idea of the balance sheet is what do you have in your company, what's the condition of your company right now, right? And it's broken down into a bunch of different pieces. And we'll talk about all of this. It's actually quite intuitive if you think about it the right way. And we'll go through this in a discussion about financial statements. Then this cash flow statement, same way. It's just another framework. Okay. There's also a bunch of accounting. There's usually financial statements. There's also a bunch of ratios in accounting and financial management that we talked about. And these are all essentially frameworks of how to think about different elements of the financial statements so we can make sense of them and do some analytics on them. We'll go through all of this. And then one level higher than all of this is how do you use all that information to do valuation, right? So all of this stuff is about how do you figure out what the value of a company is, right? How much is going to be invested, what the return is going to be, all these kind of things. If you're looking at these things and you understand exactly what's going on here, then you don't really need to, we don't really need to talk about cash, time value of money and valuation. But if you're looking at this and none of it makes any sense to you, have no idea what I'm talking about here, then let me know and we can go through a session by the end of which you'll totally understand what all of this stuff means. It looks a little complicated, but again, if you approach it step by step, it can be pretty intuitive, I think at least. Okay. Moving on to marketing. Marketing is over here, part of of this side of the business model canvas, right? So when we get into there, again, we can break this down. Kotler is one of the famous, is a pretty famous business professor over at Kellogg at Northwestern. He came up with this idea of the marketing mix, right? We're talking about product, 4 Ps: products, pricing, promotion, and place, right? Each one of these things has its own underlying thing. Components, as you can see. So there's that framework. There's different ways of framing this. People have modified that into all sorts of different ways, right? 4 Ps. There's a lot of different ways of kind of putting that out there. Now there's 7 Ps. People have kept adding Ps, right? So there's all sorts of different marketing frameworks out there. Marketers love making frameworks and making nice, colorful displays of them and so on, right? Sales funnels is another thing, right? Customer segmentation, right? We can talk about all of these kind of things. It's just when you got, all of these things are out there. We go through this actually in our marketing class. We're going to go through this in depth, but just to know the types of stuff that are out there. Market research. We're doing some of this now. Customer service, right? We've been talking about customer experience in the UIs and some other places. The digital marketing is a big thing that we're talking about. There's a lot of frameworks for that as well. Metrics is part of the analytics. How do we know if our marketing is working? A lot of different ways of thinking about analytics, right? So those are all our marketing frameworks there. Operations and organization. This is sort of this side of the business model canvas, right? What are we going to do? What are our actions going to be? Somehow this tends to kind of fall behind this kind of other sexy stuff here, right? Strategy is pretty exciting. Marketing, everybody loves. Finances, money, that's great. So this sort of becomes an afterthought, and yet this is all the work that we're doing. And invariably, what you find, and we're going to be finding it in these projects as well as we go along. Invariably, what you find is the answer. It really is about this, right? It's once you figure it out, okay, we want to do this, it's going to be this. It really comes down to what am I going to do? It's very action oriented, right? Or it needs to be. Otherwise, if you don't know what to do, then what good is the rest of this, right? So you really need to figure out what to do, and ultimately, it's going to become this: what do we do? What do we need? Who's going to help you? How do I do it? Right? This is what we're going to be. This is what's going to end up with. So in this area, we talk about supply chains and value chains. We've been going through that in the F&B side, right? So from beginning to end, from the supplier to the customers, comes to customers. I like thinking about these flows, right? The physical flow, the information flow, which goes both ways, and the financial flow, right? So goods are moving from here to here, money is moving from here to here, right? Information is going both ways, right? And then we kind of lay that out. This is part of a business system. We kind of decide where in the business system we want to play. A lot of ways of breaking that down, right? There's different ways of thinking about different functions, okay? This is different production processes, right? How do you make stuff? Is it more of a conveyor belt, or is it more, you know, tailored piece by piece, right? What is the difference there, and how do we decide where we want to be? Okay, this is logistics, right? How does this is a production process, right, within a factory, right? There's a item by item by item. You know, we've been talking about in a restaurant what happens, you know, from A to B to C, right? This is a sort of a systems diagram. We've been talking about social media management systems, right? That's going to have the same thing. What happens first, then what, then what, then what? Okay. Manufacturing, you know, lots of different manufacturing frameworks out there. This is another one, right? What happens when you're making stuff, right? How does stuff move from place to place? This is storage and transport becoming a huge thing now when there's so much delivery stuff going on, right? So this is going to be a major part of a lot of rethinking in society right now, how that's working. This is a value chain, right? You can see from an import to this is actually a food value chain with this, right? This is sort of an imported food value chain, right? Where it comes from to where it winds up at the consumer level. Different ways of thinking about how a business is organized, right? So that was all, you know, industry and sector organization. And then there's the business organization itself. How are we organizing the people in our business? Where do we put them? What are they doing? There's some structural elements of staff and supervisory, who does what, how they all fit together, right? Lots of different organizational models that are out there. This is a functional organization, divisional organization, matrix organization, team-based organization. We go through a lot of this stuff in the management class when we're starting to look through that. There's positive and negatives of all of these, right? We can start going through those. There's a lot of sort of, you know, fancy stuff out there. This is Mintzberg, different ways of thinking about how an organization works together, different structures, different types of organizations and what they do. This is a framework for CG's corporate governance. How are decisions made in an organization? You know, where's the buck stop? Who decides what? Okay, this is what boards can do, right? So lots of different things about organization, alignment, and so on. Right, and that's the problem structure. So those are the frameworks. Those are a bunch of frameworks that we can use. Once we have those frameworks, the next thing we need to do is figure out what we're going to be doing, right? So that's the work planning portion of it. For work planning, we usually use what we call a Gantt chart, right? So what a Gantt chart is telling you is what are all the things that need to be done, right? And when do they need to be done by? Okay, and it's kind of pointing out when different things are going to be done. To put the Gantt chart together, right, we go back to our structure. We think about the work streams and the tasks. This 2 to 3 layer pyramid. We'll talk about what that means as a pyramid principle later. We have our project objectives, what we want to do. This is the thing that we're trying to build. This is the problem that we're trying to solve, right? There's work stream. There's the different work streams that we need to do. All right, and you guys are dividing this up already. In this work stream, there's different tasks, right, and so on. Once we define all of those things, you want to order the tasks, right? What are sequential, right? So what needs to happen after something else? You know, you can't. You don't want to run an ad without having the content to send the ad to, right? So that's sequential, right? And what's concurrent? What can be done at the same time, right? And so that's some of the ordering, and then you arrange the timeline, right? So the timeline could be, okay, month by month, week by week, day by day. What I usually do is the further out it goes, the wider it becomes. So I want to know on a daily basis what I'm going to be doing this next week. I want to know on a weekly basis what I'm going to be doing in the next month or two, right? And I want to know on a monthly basis what I'm going to be doing for the next year, right? So arrange what your timeline is going to be. Right, it gets more and more specific as you get closer and closer, right? As it should, right? So up here, you've got the timeline, right? You've got all the different things that you're doing. You're seeing some of the stuff can be done sequentially. Some of the stuff has to be done. And some of the stuff has to be done sequentially. Some of the stuff can be done in parallel. Okay, and then finally, you decide what your milestones are, what your deliverables are. And again, in a timely fashion, right? So if you put all of this out, you can draw a line from your timeline and say, okay, at this point in time, these are the things I should have done. This should be complete. I should be in the process. This should be complete. I should be in the process of doing these things, right? And again, you can see the structure here. This is the work stream. These are all the tasks that have to come in. This is another work stream. These are all the tasks in that work stream. You can see how long it's going to be taking things, right? So this is a lot of stuff that I think about as I'm thinking about, what are we doing? How are we going to structure this for the next 6 weeks? And then finally, data gathering, what you guys are involved in right now. Essentially, we have structure, right? We have a problem. We've got a framework, right? The data is all the bones, right? So you guys are going out and looking for all the bones that we think can be put together to create this. But once we actually start putting together, maybe it doesn't look anything like this. Maybe it looks something totally different. So what do we mean about data here? It's a very sort of wide definition of data of information, right? It could be quantitative data, that's what we usually think about. It could be direct measures, things that we're measuring directly. It could be official data like census data that we've been downloading, we've been doing that. It could be different indices that we can build, so we can take those things and put them together to build an index. I know Xiaoyu on the team, we've been working together on building these indices to predict which applicants are going to enroll at the Monterey Institute, right? So we're taking data that they've given us and putting it together in different ways. Quotes are data points. People say stuff, testimonials. So and so said this and that. That's always useful. So if you find a good quote, an article that says something useful, then just just steal it. Attribute it, of course. Say where it came from. But yeah, quotes are good. Any kind of images that you see, pictures, diagrams, charts, video, animations, whatever, these should all be data points. These are all the things that you're using to figure out what the answer should be. These are all the things that you're going to be using to demonstrate why the answer is what you think it's going to be. Where are you going to be getting all these all this information? Well, the interwebs, the internet is going to be one of the major areas to get it. That's the desk research that we do, right? Interviews are important, right? Both with the client and anybody else that we need to talk to, right? We get that from there. The market research, right? We may want to do some surveys or run some focus groups, go get primary data this way, or there can be other direct measurement that's going on. We're producing our own data by going out and measuring things and seeing where they are, right? Talk a little bit about the internet, because that's where most of you guys are doing your stuff right now. Google is amazing. I'm sure you guys are all using Google. And if you feel that you need a little bit of help, you can use it more effectively. Here's a couple of tips and tricks that I kind of put in. There's a whole thing about the art of searching, doing natural language queries, doing image searches that I've been talking to you about for slides and frameworks. There's a lot of stuff there. Think about some useful terms that are helpful in searching, right? So if we're thinking about, let's say, data visualization, right? You can put principles of data visualization or data visualization frameworks, right? That gives you some idea of what's going on. So these kind of like prefixes or suffixes sometimes help you out in your searching. And again, if we want to go in deeper and talk about any of this stuff, we can do that. It's very important to get multiple sources. Essentially, what Google allows you to do is crowdsource your answers, right? So we talked about getting at least 3-5 sources out there. It could be videos, articles, slides, all sorts of stuff out there, but don't stick to just one source, because a lot of the things, like all the frameworks that we showed you, there's a lot of different opinions out there. There's rarely just one way or to think about it, or one right answer to this, right? So very important to see what's out there, get the variety out there, right? And when you're looking at that, you want to take notes on this stuff. You want to be able to kind of, cut to the chase, do kind of quick and dirty, is what I was talking about, and sort of instant expertise, right? Again, if you want to get a little bit deeper on at least how I do that, I'm happy to take you through that. If you're already adept at going through an article very, very quickly and picking out the most important points to it, then that's fine. Do it your way. That's wonderful. But that is what you want to do. You want to be able to go through all of this stuff, all of your sources, and pick out the most important stuff very, very quickly. We're asking you to do that in your work as well, right? So that's why I was asking you, all right, what are the 5 things that you want to say about this? What are the 3 to 5 things you want to say about that? And that's what it is. When you're reading, you would be thinking about the same way. What are the 5 things? What are the 5 key takeaways? What are the 3 critical things that I'm seeing here? What's the point, right? What's going on here? And then we organize those points into different groups. There's the pyramid principle again. We'll go back into this. Comes up again and again, right? There's so many times we see that the issue is around organization and segmentation, putting things into groups and sets and whatnot, whether we're talking about databases or business models or whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of this that happens. Pyramid principle is all about that. We get to that for a second, for very briefly today, but we can have a longer discussion about that. And then once you've got all of that, as we say, we compare across the different sources, what's standard, what's consensus, was everybody seem to be saying. You can have some confidence that that's probably fairly industry standard. And what are the differences, right? And why are those differences there? And finally, with all of that, what's relevant to me? What do I want to do about this? So when we talk about when we talk about that sort of art of searching and Google and the image searches, especially, right? You can just start from the beginning. Remember, before we had, look, these are the solutions that we're looking for our problems, right? So here's a search on restaurant business models, right? Tons and tons of stuff out there, right? So you can go through all of this stuff and just get a sense of, okay, well, what business models are there, right? What makes sense for us, right? Here's one on searchable database structure. This is the second one, right? So we're trying to make a searchable database, right? What does the web tell us about that? Here's one on social media management systems. Okay, so again, tons of stuff to look at. And finally, here's one on what was it? This is grant applications, right? Grant application materials. Now you look at this one, right? And you see, well, this is actually giving you a bunch of grant applications, right? Which is not terribly useful. So, if I modify this if I look at this one over here that looked interesting, that had more, I think it was this one, right? So if I went into this one, which looks like it's giving me some kind of structure, and then I looked for related images, I got all of these things about grant application materials that really went through the types of materials you normally need, what you need to put together, and so on, right? So Google can really sort of give you a head start on a lot of this stuff. So once you have all that stuff, right? Once you have the data gathering, right? Then you kind of go backward up the chain, right? We're going to put that all together and figure out what all that data say. That's yet another structuring point, right? So we're taking all the data down here. This is where your supporting evidence is. This is where your data is, your charts, your graphs, your quotes, your testimonies, all that stuff is down here. And we're systematically putting those data pieces together to make points, to make messages, right? And we've been talking about that a lot, right? So, here's a chart. It's showing you this data over this time for these, for Chittenden County and whatever, right? And so what's the point, right? Who cares? What's the point here? You're trying to put those points together into a storyline that's giving you your overall idea, right? Or the other way around, if you're starting off with, look, here's an idea, here's a solution that I want to test, right? For this to be true, what needs to be true? This is the problem structure, right? And so if, how am I going to show that this idea is actually valid? What data do I need? What am I going to go look for, right? So this is the problem structuring and data gathering portion. Going back this way is the analytic portion, going from the data back to the points that are being made. Okay. This one is data cleansing, right? So when we get that data, there's a lot of cleansing going on. I know in a couple of the teams we're deep into data cleansing now. So lots of stuff out there how to do data cleansing. We've also been talking about data visualization, same kind of thing, right? There's tons and tons of stuff out there about data visualization, how that works. It doesn't necessarily need to be all that technical, really. I mean, I talked to one person who said, "Can I just draw these out?" And absolutely, just draw these out, right? The question is, what should it look like, not the details of how you're going to be doing it. Although, if you get good at that, then that's you're ahead of the game. There's a lot of ways to do that as well. And finally, we're going to be coming up to the solution, right? So we've got all our data, we've got this framework. We're trying to figure out, okay, something about scalable changes in the evolutionary process. The story we need to come up with is the analysis, which is, all right, this is how it works, right? We took all those bones, put them all together, made these 5 different skeletons, put them in order, and now we're telling the story that we started off this way, ended up this way, and went through these processes in the middle. How do you put that together? Well, that's yet another structuring element of the pyramid principle. A lot of different ways of looking at this. This is all from just a Google image search of all of these things. Okay, tons and tons of this stuff. How to put it together. Right? you know, this is the same thing we were talking about before. Even the Gantt chart, really, you can look at it as a pyramid principle thing, because you're breaking it down into big groups. These are the work streams, and then further groups within there, which are the tasks, right? There's this is the book, the pyramid principle. If you want to go take a look at it, a lot of different ways that it's explained, you know, all over the web, and we'll talk about this in detail at some point as well. Okay, there we are. Look at that, 94 slides, right? In about an hour. Okay.